Hello, dear listeners, and thank you for joining us today on the English Globe. It is always a pleasure to have you with us, no matter where you are listening from around the world. Whether you are studying English at home, traveling, or simply taking a quiet moment to improve your listening skills, we are truly happy that you have chosen to spend this time learning with us. Our goal remains simple and clear. We help you understand English by exploring real global topics in a calm, neutral, and educational way, so you can confidently follow international news and improve your vocabulary, sentence structure, and overall comprehension.
Yes, welcome everyone. Today's episode is connected to an important global event that has appeared widely in international news and discussions. We are going to talk about the World Economic Forum and explain why the meeting in Davos attracts so much global attention every year, especially when well-known political figures, including former US President Donald Trump, take part in it. This episode is designed especially for English learners, so our focus is not on opinions or arguments, but on clear explanations, neutral language, and understanding how such global events are described in professional English.
That's right, Julia. Let me start with a thought-provoking question for our listeners. What if some of the most important conversations about the world's economy, technology, jobs, and future challenges happen far away from public elections and official government buildings, in a small town surrounded by mountains, where powerful people meet not to vote, but to talk, share ideas, and influence global thinking? This place is called Davos, and even if most people will never travel there, the discussions that happen there can still affect lives, economies, and opportunities across the world.
Exactly, and this is why Davos matters even to people who have never heard of it before. The World Economic Forum, often called the WEF, brings together leaders from many different fields, including politics, business, technology, and education. They discuss global problems such as economic growth, climate change, artificial intelligence, and international cooperation. These discussions do not create laws, but they often shape ideas, influence policies, and guide future decisions, which is why journalists and global media pay close attention to what is said there.
Now, when a well-known figure like Donald Trump attends or speaks at Davos, global attention naturally increases. This is not only because of who he is, but also because of what his presence represents. Trump is known for having strong views about globalization, international trade, and global institutions, so when he appears at a forum like Davos, people around the world become curious. They want to understand why he is there, what message he wants to send, and how global leaders and business communities respond to his words.
And this curiosity is completely natural. However, for English learners, the most important thing is not taking sides or forming strong opinions, but learning how such events are explained in neutral professional English. News reports about Davos often use careful language, formal expressions, and balanced explanations. By listening to and understanding this type of content, learners can improve their ability to follow international news, academic discussions, and professional conversations without feeling confused or overwhelmed.
That is a very important point. Many English learners feel that global economic topics are too complex or too difficult to understand. But when we break them down into simple ideas and clear language, they become powerful learning tools. Topics like the World Economic Forum help learners understand words such as economy, global cooperation, leadership, influence, and policy, which appear very often in news articles, interviews, and official statements.
Yes, and understanding forums like the WEF also helps learners see how the modern world is connected. Decisions made in one country can affect markets, jobs, and technologies in another. Davos is often described as a meeting place for global dialogue, where people try to understand shared problems and possible solutions. Learning about this through English helps you not only improve your language skills, but also your global awareness and critical thinking.
Before we continue, it is very important to clearly state that this podcast is purely educational. We are not here to promote or criticize any political leader, country, or institution. Our aim is to help you understand what the World Economic Forum is, why Trump's trip to Davos attracted attention, and how such events are discussed in international English-language media. We encourage you to listen with curiosity, focus on the language, and treat this episode as a learning experience.
Absolutely. Throughout this episode, we will explain ideas step by step, define important words, and use simple examples to make everything easier to understand. If international news sometimes feels too fast or complicated, this podcast is designed to slow things down for you. Think of this episode as a guide that helps you feel more comfortable when listening to global discussions in English.
So as we begin today's topic, relax, stay focused on the language, and enjoy the learning process. In the next part of our podcast, we will start by clearly explaining what the World Economic Forum actually is, how it began, and why it continues to play a role in global discussions today. You are listening to the English Globe, where learning English means understanding the world more clearly. To understand today's topic clearly, we first need to answer a very basic but important question. What exactly is the World Economic Forum, and why does it exist? Many people hear the name often in the news, especially during the Davos meeting, but they are not always sure what kind of organization it is or what it actually does. In simple terms, the World Economic Forum, often called the WEF, is an international organization that brings together leaders from different parts of society to discuss global economic and social issues in a structured and organized way.
That's a good starting point, Adam. Let me rephrase that in even simpler words for our listeners. A forum is a place where people meet to talk and share ideas, not to vote or make laws. The word economy refers to how money, jobs, businesses and resources are managed in the world. So, when we say World Economic Forum, we are talking about a global meeting place where important people come together to discuss how the world's economy works and how global problems might be understood or addressed.
Exactly. Now let's look at when and why the World Economic Forum was created. The WEF was founded in 1971 by a German economist named Klaus Schwab. At that time, the world economy was changing quickly, and many countries were becoming more connected through trade, technology, and finance. Klaus Schwab believed that business leaders, governments, and experts should have a neutral space where they could talk openly about economic challenges and cooperation, instead of working separately without communication.
In simpler terms, the idea was to create a place where dialogue could happen. Dialogue means open conversation. The founder believed that if leaders talked to each other more, they could understand global problems better. This does not mean they would always agree, but at least they could listen, explain their views, and learn from one another. For English learners, it is useful to remember that the World Economic Forum was created mainly for discussion, not decision-making.
Over time, the World Economic Forum grew from a small European meeting into a global organization. In the early years, it mainly focused on business and economic management in Europe. However, as globalization increased, meaning countries became more connected, the WEF expanded its focus. It began to include global issues such as international trade, financial stability, education, healthcare, climate change, and later technology and artificial intelligence.
This is an important point for learners. The word global means something that affects the whole world, not just one country. When the WEF talks about global challenges, it is discussing problems that cross borders, such as economic crises, climate risks, or technological changes. These topics often appear in international news, so understanding them helps you follow English language media more easily.
Now let's talk about who organizes the World Economic Forum. The WEF is a non-profit organization, which means it is not officially designed to make money for owners or shareholders. Its headquarters are located in Switzerland, a country often chosen for international organizations because of its neutral political position. The organization is managed by a leadership team and works with members and partners from many countries and industries.
To put that simply, the WEF is run like an international organization with staff, researchers, and planners. It is supported by member companies and partners, which are usually large businesses, but it also works with governments, universities, and international institutions. For English learners, the word leaders here does not mean only politicians. It includes business leaders, academic experts, technology innovators, and sometimes representatives from civil society.
One of the most well-known activities of the World Economic Forum is its annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland. This meeting usually takes place in January and gathers thousands of participants from around the world. During this time, Davos becomes a place where speeches, panel discussions, interviews, and private meetings happen almost all day long. Journalists from major international media organizations report on these discussions, which is why Davos often appears in the news.
Let me explain this in very simple language. Davos is a small mountain town, but during the WEF meeting, it becomes a global meeting point. Leaders come there to talk about the future of the economy and the world. They do not sign laws there, and they do not control countries, but they do share ideas. Those ideas may later influence decisions in governments or businesses, which is why people pay attention.
Another important thing to understand is that the World Economic Forum does not have legal power. It cannot force countries or companies to do anything. Its influence comes mainly from conversation and networking. Networking means building relationships and exchanging ideas. When leaders meet in one place and discuss common challenges, they often gain new perspectives that may affect how they act later in their own countries or organizations.
That's a key learning point. Many English learners think that international forums control the world, but in reality, they mostly create space for discussion. Understanding this helps learners avoid confusion and focus on facts. When you hear news reports about the WEF, journalists usually describe what was discussed, what leaders said, and how markets or governments reacted afterward.
Over the years, the topics discussed at the World Economic Forum have changed with the world itself. In the past, the focus was mainly on economic growth and business cooperation. Today, the agenda is much broader. It includes climate change, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, global health, energy security, and social inequality. These are all topics that affect daily life in different ways.
And from a language learning perspective, this makes the WEF a very useful topic. The vocabulary used in these discussions is often repeated in news articles, reports, and interviews. Words like economy, global, leaders, cooperation, development, and sustainability appear again and again. By understanding how these words are used in context, learners can improve both their listening and reading skills.
It is also helpful to understand that the World Economic Forum publishes reports and research throughout the year, not only during the Davos meeting. These reports analyze global trends and risks. Journalists, students, and policymakers often refer to these reports, which is another reason the WEF remains relevant in global conversations.
To summarize this section in simple terms, the World Economic Forum is an international organization created to encourage dialogue about global economic and social issues. It was founded in 1971, is based in Switzerland, and organizes meetings, especially the famous annual meeting in Davos. It brings together leaders from different fields to talk, share ideas, and understand global challenges.
And as English learners, understanding what the World Economic Forum is helps you feel more confident when listening to international news. Instead of feeling lost when you hear words like Davos or WEF, you can understand the context and focus on the language being used. In the next section, we will move deeper and explain why Davos has become such an important place for global discussions and why media attention around it is so intense. Now that we understand what the World Economic Forum is, the next important question is why Davos matters so much in global politics and economics. Many listeners may wonder why presidents, prime ministers, business leaders, and international experts spend time and effort traveling to a small mountain town for meetings that do not produce laws or official agreements. The answer lies in the difference between influence and authority, which is a key idea to understand when following international news.
That's a very useful distinction, Adam. Let me put it in simpler words for our listeners. Authority means having the official power to make rules or decisions that others must follow, such as passing laws or signing treaties. Influence, on the other hand, means having the ability to shape opinions, guide discussions, and affect how people think about problems and solutions. Davos is not a place of authority, but it is a place of influence.
Exactly. World leaders attend Davos not because they must, but because it gives them an opportunity to communicate directly with other leaders and decision-makers in an informal setting. Unlike official government meetings, Davos allows conversations to happen more openly. Leaders can explain their views, listen to others, and test ideas without the pressure of making immediate decisions. This environment encourages dialogue rather than confrontation.
To connect this to everyday life, imagine a meeting at your workplace or school where people discuss ideas before making a final decision later. That discussion may not change anything immediately, but it helps people understand different opinions and prepare for future actions. Davos works in a similar way on a global level. It is a place where ideas are shared first, and decisions may come later in different locations.
Another reason Davos matters is the variety of people who attend. It is not limited to politicians. Business leaders, economists, scientists, technology experts, and representatives from international organizations are also present. This mix allows economic and political ideas to be discussed together. For example, a political leader might hear directly from business leaders about economic risks, or from scientists about climate challenges, which can influence how that leader thinks in the future.
This is important for learners to understand because global problems are rarely simple. Issues like inflation, energy security, climate change, or technological development affect governments, businesses, and ordinary people at the same time. When leaders from different fields meet in one place, they can see how these problems are connected. That is why Davos discussions often focus on cooperation and long-term thinking, rather than short-term political debates.
It is also helpful to clarify a common misunderstanding. Some people believe that secret decisions are made at Davos that control the world economy. In reality, Davos is mainly about discussion, not decision-making. The meetings are often reported by journalists, and many speeches and panels are public. While private conversations do happen, as they do at most international events, there is no legal authority that comes from the World Economic Forum.
In simple terms, Davos does not replace governments or international institutions. Countries still make decisions through their own systems, such as parliaments, elections, and official negotiations. Davos simply provides a platform where leaders can talk, explain their positions, and understand global trends. For English learners, recognizing this difference helps avoid confusion when reading or listening to news reports.
Now let's look at how Davos influences global conversations. When influential people speak at Davos, their words are often reported by international media. Journalists analyze speeches, interviews, and panel discussions, and these reports then reach audiences around the world. As a result, certain topics gain attention, such as economic uncertainty, technological risks, or environmental challenges.
A real-world example of this influence can be seen in how discussions at Davos often appear in news headlines shortly afterward. If leaders talk about rising energy prices or changes in global trade, those topics may be discussed more widely in newspapers, television programs, and online platforms. This does not mean Davos creates the problem, but it helps bring attention to issues that already exist.
Another important role of Davos is agenda setting. Agenda setting means deciding which topics deserve attention. When global leaders repeatedly discuss certain challenges at Davos, those challenges often become part of wider global conversations. Governments, companies, and institutions may then study these topics more seriously or include them in future planning.
To make this more relatable, think about how a topic becomes popular in everyday conversation. When many people talk about the same issue, it starts to feel more important. Davos works in a similar way, but on a global scale. By bringing many influential voices together, it helps highlight which issues are considered urgent or important at a particular time.
It is also worth noting that Davos offers leaders a chance to explain their positions to a global audience. Speeches at Davos are often carefully prepared because leaders know they are speaking not only to the people in the room, but also to viewers and readers around the world. This makes Davos an important stage for global communication.
For English learners, this is especially useful because the language used at Davos is usually formal, clear, and structured. Leaders often explain complex ideas in a way that can be understood by an international audience. Listening to this type of language helps learners become familiar with professional English used in economics, politics, and global affairs.
To summarize this section, Davos matters because it is a place of influence, not authority. Leaders attend to exchange ideas, understand global challenges, and communicate their views. The discussions there help shape global conversations, even though decisions are made elsewhere. Understanding this helps listeners follow international news more calmly and accurately.
And from a learner's perspective, Davos is a useful example of how global discussions connect to everyday life. Topics discussed there often affect jobs, prices, technology, and the environment. By understanding why Davos matters, you are not only improving your English, but also learning how the world communicates about shared challenges. In the next section, we will look more closely at who attends Davos and what kinds of topics they usually discuss.
To fully understand why the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos receives so much attention, it is important to look closely at who actually attends and what kinds of discussions take place there. Davos is not a meeting for only one type of person or one profession. Instead, it brings together a wide mix of participants from different sectors of society, which is one of the main reasons it has become such a central place for global discussion.
Let me explain that in simpler words for our listeners. When we say diversity of participants, we mean that many different kinds of people attend Davos. These people come from politics, business, economics, technology, science, and international organizations. Because they have different backgrounds and experiences, they also bring different ideas and concerns, which makes the discussions broader and more balanced.
One large group of participants at Davos is political leaders. This includes presidents, prime ministers, ministers, and senior government officials from many countries. They attend Davos to explain their country's priorities, listen to global concerns, and communicate with leaders from other nations in a less formal setting than official diplomatic meetings. These conversations help them understand how global economic and political trends might affect their own countries.
In everyday terms, political leaders attend Davos to listen and to be heard. They may give speeches, join panel discussions, or take part in interviews. However, they do not pass laws or sign official agreements there. For English learners, it is useful to notice that when politicians speak at Davos, they often use careful and diplomatic language, which is common in international communication.
Another major group at Davos is business leaders. These are often CEOs and senior executives of large companies from industries such as finance, energy, manufacturing, technology, and healthcare. Business leaders attend Davos because global economic changes, such as inflation, supply chain issues, or technological innovation, directly affect how companies operate and plan for the future.
To make this clearer, think about how businesses need to understand the global environment to survive and grow. When business leaders attend Davos, they listen to economists, policymakers, and scientists to better understand risks and opportunities. This helps them prepare for changes that might affect jobs, investments, or products. For learners, this shows how closely the economy and business decisions are connected.
Economists and academic experts also play an important role at Davos. These participants often provide research, data, and long-term analysis of global trends. They help explain complex issues such as economic growth, inequality, financial stability, and development. Their role is especially important because they add evidence-based thinking to discussions that might otherwise be based only on opinions or short-term interests.
In simpler language, economists help explain why things happen, not just what happens. They use numbers, studies, and models to describe global problems. When English learners listen to economists at Davos, they may hear formal but structured language that explains causes, effects, and possible outcomes. This is very useful for improving academic and professional English.
In recent years, technology leaders have become increasingly visible at Davos. This includes CEOs and founders of major technology companies, as well as experts in fields such as artificial intelligence, digital security, and innovation. Their presence reflects how important technology has become in shaping economies, jobs, and daily life around the world.
Let's break that down. Technology is no longer just about computers or phones. It affects how we work, communicate, learn, and even make decisions. At Davos, technology leaders often talk about artificial intelligence, data privacy, automation, and the future of work. For English learners, these discussions introduce modern vocabulary that appears frequently in today's news.
Another key topic discussed at Davos is climate and environmental sustainability. Scientists, environmental experts, and policymakers talk about climate change, energy transition, and environmental risks. These discussions are important because environmental issues affect economies, industries, and communities worldwide.
In everyday life, climate discussions connect to things people already experience, such as weather changes, energy costs, and environmental protection. At Davos, leaders talk about how countries and companies can reduce risks and prepare for the future. The language used in these discussions often focuses on responsibility, cooperation, and long-term planning, which is helpful for learners to recognize.
Jobs and employment are also central topics at Davos. With changes in technology and the global economy, many leaders are concerned about how jobs will change in the future. Discussions often focus on skills, education, and how workers can prepare for new types of work.
This is very relevant to everyday life. When leaders talk about jobs at Davos, they are discussing how people can remain employable and adapt to change. For English learners, this topic introduces useful words such as skills, training, workforce, and employment, which are commonly used in professional and educational settings.
What makes Davos unique is not just the individual topics, but the way they are discussed together. Economic, technological, environmental, and social issues are connected, and Davos provides a place where these connections can be explored in one setting. This encourages broader thinking and cooperation across different fields.
For learners, this shows that global issues are complex but understandable when explained clearly. By listening to how different leaders explain their ideas, learners can improve their ability to understand complex topics and express them in simple English. It also helps build confidence when following international discussions.
To summarize, Davos brings together a diverse group of people, including politicians, business leaders, economists, and technology experts. They discuss major global topics such as the economy, technology, climate, jobs, and artificial intelligence. These discussions do not create laws, but they help shape global understanding and future planning.
And as English learners, understanding who attends Davos and what they talk about helps you connect global discussions to your own life. The ideas discussed there often influence news, policies, and business decisions that affect daily life. In the next section, we will focus more specifically on Donald Trump's presence at Davos and why it attracted so much international attention.
To understand why Donald Trump's relationship with Davos attracts so much attention, it is helpful to look calmly and carefully at his past views on global institutions and international cooperation. Donald Trump became widely known in global politics for expressing skepticism about large international organizations and agreements, often questioning whether they truly benefit national economies or ordinary workers. These views made his approach different from many traditional political leaders who usually speak in favor of multilateral cooperation and global institutions.
Let me explain that in simpler language. Global institutions are organizations where many countries work together, such as international forums, trade organizations, or alliances. Trump often used direct and simple language to express doubts about these institutions. For English learners, it is important to notice that his language style was usually clear, strong, and focused on national interests, which made his speeches and interviews easy to understand but also very noticeable in international discussions.
During his time in public life, Trump often emphasized ideas like national sovereignty, economic independence, and domestic industry. He frequently spoke about protecting local jobs and industries, and he sometimes criticized global agreements that he believed were unfair to his country. These positions influenced how people around the world viewed his participation in international events, including forums like Davos, which are usually associated with global cooperation.
From a language learning perspective, Trump's communication style is an interesting example. He often used short sentences, repetition, and strong keywords. This made his messaging direct and memorable. For learners, listening to different communication styles helps build awareness of how tone and word choice can change the impact of a message, even when discussing complex global topics.
Because of his past criticism of global institutions, Trump's presence at Davos naturally gained attention. Many observers were curious about why a leader known for questioning globalization would attend a global economic forum. Journalists and analysts focused on what message he wanted to deliver, how he would describe global cooperation, and whether his tone would differ from previous appearances by other leaders.
This is a good example of how context matters in communication. When someone with a well-known position enters a space that seems different from their usual views, people pay attention. For English learners, this shows how background knowledge helps in understanding news stories. Knowing Trump's past statements helps listeners understand why media coverage focused so closely on his words at Davos.
Another reason Trump's appearance at Davos stood out was his speaking style compared to more traditional leaders. Many political leaders at international forums use diplomatic language, carefully balanced sentences, and formal expressions. Trump, on the other hand, often preferred a more conversational and straightforward style, which made his speeches sound different from others on the same stage.
In simpler terms, traditional leaders often speak in long formal sentences that are carefully prepared. Trump's style was usually more direct and less formal. For learners, this difference is useful because it shows that English can be used in many ways, depending on the speaker's goals and personality. Understanding these differences helps learners improve listening skills and recognize different tones in English.
It is also important to note that Trump's participation at Davos did not mean a change in the nature of the forum itself. Davos remained a place for discussion and exchange of ideas. Trump used the platform to explain his views to a global audience, just as other leaders used it to explain theirs. The forum provided space for different perspectives, which is one of its main purposes.
For English learners, This highlights an important communication skill: expressing disagreement or different priorities without direct conflict. At Davos, leaders often speak about their own positions while listening to others. This teaches learners how professional disagreement can be expressed politely and clearly in English, using calm language and structured arguments.
Media attention around Trump's Davos appearances often focused on key phrases and themes from his speeches. Journalists analyzed his choice of words, his emphasis on national economic strength, and his views on trade and global cooperation. This kind of analysis shows how language is closely examined in global communication, especially when spoken by high-profile figures.
This is a valuable lesson for learners. Words matter, especially in international settings. Small differences in tone or vocabulary can change how a message is understood. By listening carefully to how leaders speak at Davos, learners can improve their ability to understand meaning beyond just vocabulary, including intention and emphasis.
To summarize this section, Donald Trump's relationship with Davos is important because it reflects a contrast between different approaches to globalization and international dialogue. His past views on global institutions, his direct communication style, and his willingness to speak openly made his presence at Davos noticeable and widely discussed.
And from a learning perspective, this topic helps listeners understand how tone, language, and messaging work in real-world English communication. By studying different speaking styles, learners can become more flexible and confident in their own English use. In the next section, we will look more closely at Trump's specific trip to Davos and explore what messages were highlighted during his visit.
Now that we have discussed Donald Trump's general relationship with Davos, it is time to focus more closely on his actual trip and try to understand what message he wanted to communicate. When analyzing political events like this, it is very important to avoid assumptions and instead focus on what was said, where it was said, and how it was presented. Trump's decision to attend Davos can be understood as a communication choice rather than a sudden change in beliefs or positions.
Let me simplify that idea for our listeners. When we talk about motivation, we are asking why someone chooses to do something, not what people think or guess about their intentions. In this section, we will look at Trump's visit as a form of communication. That means we will focus on his speeches, his words, and his setting, rather than emotional reactions or political arguments.
One key reason Trump attended Davos was to speak directly to a global audience. Davos is not only a meeting place for people in the room, but also a global media event watched by millions around the world. When a leader speaks at Davos, the message travels far beyond the conference halls through television, newspapers, and online platforms. For someone like Trump who values direct messaging, Davos provided a powerful international stage.
This is where the word audience becomes important. An audience is the group of people who listen to or receive a message. At Davos, the audience includes world leaders, business executives, journalists, investors, and ordinary people following global news. For English learners, understanding who the audience is helps explain why a speaker chooses certain words, topics, and tone.
Another motivation behind Trump's visit was to present his economic approach in a global setting. Throughout his political career, Trump emphasized themes such as economic growth, job creation, and national competitiveness. Speaking at Davos allowed him to explain these ideas to an international audience and show how his policies fit into the broader global economy.
Let's pause here to explain an important word: policy. A policy is a plan or set of ideas used by a government or organization to guide decisions and actions. When Trump talked about economic policy at Davos, he was explaining how his approach to trade, business, and employment was designed to support growth. For learners, policy is a very common word in News English.
Trump's speeches at Davos often highlighted key themes that were familiar to anyone who followed his political messaging. These themes included economic performance, business confidence, and national priorities. He often spoke about achievements he believed were important and used Davos as an opportunity to present his view of economic success directly to influential listeners.
This connects closely to another useful word: speech. A speech is a formal talk given to an audience. At Davos, speeches are usually prepared carefully because they are recorded and reported worldwide. For English learners, listening to speeches helps improve understanding of formal English, structured arguments, and persuasive language, even when the topic is explained in a neutral way.
It is also important to understand the role of strategy in Trump's trip to Davos. Strategy refers to a planned approach used to achieve a goal. Attending Davos can be seen as a strategic decision to communicate directly with business leaders and global influencers, rather than relying only on domestic platforms. This does not mean agreement with everyone in the room, but it does show an effort to present ideas in an international forum.
In simple terms, strategy is about choosing the right place and time to speak. Davos is known as a place where global economic ideas are discussed, so speaking there sends a message that the speaker wants to be part of that conversation. For learners, recognizing strategy helps explain why leaders sometimes appear in unexpected places.
Global audiences interpreted Trump's visit in different ways, depending on their background and expectations. Some listeners focused on the economic points he raised, others paid attention to his tone and style, and many compared his message with those of other leaders at the same event. This variety of interpretation is normal in global communication.
This is a good moment to explain interpretation. Interpretation means how people understand or explain a message. Different audiences may interpret the same speech differently based on culture, experience, or media coverage. For English learners, this shows why it is important to listen carefully and focus on the actual words used, not only on headlines or opinions.
Media coverage played a large role in shaping how Trump's Davos visit was understood. Journalists selected key quotes, summarized main ideas, and compared his speech with previous appearances by other leaders. This process shows how messages are filtered and presented to the public, which is an important part of political communication.
For learners, this highlights the importance of media literacy. Media literacy means the ability to understand how news is created and presented. By listening to full explanations instead of short headlines, learners can develop a deeper understanding of both language and meaning in English news reporting.
Another important aspect of Trump's message at Davos was contrast. His style often stood out among other speakers who used more diplomatic and formal language. This contrast made his speeches more noticeable and increased media attention. However, the forum itself remained neutral, allowing different voices to be heard without forcing agreement.
This contrast is useful for learners because it shows that English communication can vary widely. Some speakers use formal and careful language, while others use direct and simple expressions. Both styles can exist in the same space, and understanding them helps learners become more flexible listeners.
To summarize this section, Trump's trip to Davos can be understood as a communication strategy aimed at a global audience. His motivation was to present his economic ideas, highlight key themes, and use an international platform to explain his approach. The visit was interpreted in different ways around the world, reflecting the diversity of global audiences.
And from an English learning perspective, this section teaches us valuable vocabulary such as policy, speech, strategy, and audience, while also showing how political communication works in real life. In the next section, we will explore how different countries and global actors reacted to Trump's appearance at Davos and what those reactions tell us about international communication.
After analyzing Donald Trump's visit to Davos and the messages he presented, it is important to look at how the world responded. Global reactions to high-profile events like this are naturally diverse. Different countries, media outlets, business leaders, and international organizations interpret speeches in ways that reflect their perspectives, priorities, or audiences. Today, our goal is to compare these reactions neutrally, without supporting or opposing any viewpoint.
Let's simplify that. A reaction is how people respond to something, like a speech or event. Different groups may have different reactions because they focus on different issues or have different interests. For English learners, understanding reactions is a great way to practice words like support, criticism, and analysis, and to describe them calmly in conversation.
Starting with media reactions, international news outlets covered Trump's Davos speech extensively. Some media focused on economic points he raised, such as job creation, trade policies, and growth forecasts. They highlighted phrases he used and explained their potential implications for global business. Other media focused on his style and tone, noting that his language was more direct than that of other leaders at the forum. Still others analyzed how his message compared with statements from previous administrations or current global priorities.
In simpler words, journalists write about different aspects of the same speech. Some focus on the numbers or policies, some on the way he speaks, and some on the bigger picture. For learners, this shows how one event can have multiple interpretations. You can practice describing reactions using words like "some reported that," "others noticed that," or "analysts explained that."
Turning to the business community, reactions were also mixed. Some business leaders appreciated Trump's emphasis on economic growth, deregulation, and trade opportunities. They highlighted statements that suggested stability for investors or predictability for markets. Others were more cautious, noting that his focus on national interests could affect international trade agreements and global cooperation. Importantly, most business responses were analytical rather than emotional, focusing on potential outcomes rather than expressing personal opinions.
Let me clarify for learners. Analysts or business leaders often explain consequences or risks rather than saying they like or dislike someone. For example, you might say, "Some investors believe this policy could affect trade," or "others think it may influence market confidence." This neutral way of describing opinions is very useful in English, especially in academic, business, and media contexts.
Political leaders in other countries also reacted in various ways. Some welcomed the opportunity to hear Trump's views directly, seeing it as part of normal diplomatic exchange. Others highlighted differences in policy priorities, especially on trade, climate, and multilateral cooperation. It is important to note that these reactions were expressed through official statements, press releases, or interviews, often with carefully chosen language to avoid conflict.
This is an excellent example for learners of neutral reporting. Official reactions usually avoid strong emotional words. Phrases like "noted differences," "emphasized priorities," or "welcomed the opportunity" are common. Practicing these expressions helps learners describe opinions without sounding judgmental or biased.
Another dimension of reaction came from experts and analysts who study international economics and policy. Their responses were largely analytical, highlighting potential impacts of Trump's statements on global trade, investment, and economic forecasts. Analysts often used conditional language, such as, "if this policy is implemented, it may affect global supply chains," or "these statements could influence investor confidence." This careful phrasing allows discussion without asserting certainty, which is a useful language skill.
For English learners, conditional expressions are very important. Words like if, may, could, and might allow you to discuss possibilities instead of making definite statements. This is especially helpful when describing events in politics, economics, or international relations, where outcomes are uncertain.
It is also important to recognize that reactions can be categorized into three types: support, criticism, and analysis. Support refers to positive reception or agreement with statements or policies. Criticism highlights disagreement or potential concerns. Analysis provides explanation or interpretation without expressing strong approval or disapproval. By recognizing these categories, listeners can better understand media coverage and international discourse.
Let's give an example for clarity. A supportive statement could be, some business leaders welcomed his focus on growth. A critical statement might be, some analysts expressed concern about trade policies. An analytical statement could be, experts explained that the speech may influence global markets depending on future agreements. Learning to use these phrases helps learners discuss international events in neutral English.
Social media also played a role in global reactions. Platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn allowed business professionals, journalists, and ordinary people to share impressions quickly. Some users highlighted memorable quotes, others shared commentary or analysis, and some questioned implications. This rapid exchange demonstrates how global audiences process information differently from traditional media.
In simple words, social media reactions are usually shorter and sometimes more emotional, but they also contain useful vocabulary. Words like impact, growth, market, strategy, and cooperation often appear. For English learners, reading or listening to social media commentary alongside formal news helps expand understanding of both formal and informal language.
In summary, reactions to Trump's Davos appearance were diverse, but can be described neutrally. Media, business leaders, politicians, and analysts responded by highlighting key points, analyzing potential effects, or noting differences in style. Understanding these reactions without taking sides allows listeners to follow international news clearly and calmly.
And from a learning perspective, this section is very useful for English learners. It teaches vocabulary such as support, criticism, analysis, reaction, audience, policy, and conditional language like may and could. It also provides a model for describing multiple perspectives neutrally, which is an essential skill for professional, academic, and international communication.
In the next section, we will explore the broader lessons from Trump's visit to Davos, focusing on how global forums shape international discussions and how listeners can use these examples to improve both their understanding of world events and their English skills. As we continue exploring the World Economic Forum, it is essential to address common myths and misunderstandings about the organization. The WEF often attracts attention not only for its discussions and events, but also because many people confuse what it actually does. For learners of English and international news, clarifying facts is very useful. Misinformation can create confusion and distract from real understanding, especially in educational content. So today, we will calmly and clearly explain what the WEF is not, the difference between discussion forums and governing bodies, and why critical thinking is important when reading news or social media.
Let me start by simplifying that. A myth is a false belief or idea, and a misunderstanding is when someone thinks something is true, but it is not correct. Many people hear about the WEF and form opinions without checking the facts. This section is about helping listeners understand the truth. We will also show how you can use these examples to improve your English, think clearly, and read news carefully.
One common myth is that the World Economic Forum makes laws or directly controls countries. This is not true. The WEF is a discussion platform where global leaders, business executives, economists, scientists, and other experts share ideas. It does not have legal authority, and it cannot enforce rules or policies in any country. Understanding this distinction is important because it helps you avoid thinking of the WEF as a governing body, which it is not.
In simpler language, the WEF is like a meeting or a conference, not a government. People talk, share ideas, and discuss plans, but they do not have the power to make rules that everyone must follow. For learners, notice the words platform, conference, and discussion. These are very useful when describing organizations, events, or meetings in English.
Another misunderstanding is that the WEF secretly controls the world economy. In reality, The WEF provides a place for dialogue, but the real decision-making happens in governments, central banks, international institutions, and private companies. While discussions at Davos can influence thinking or highlight trends, they do not replace the formal decision-making structures of countries or global organizations.
Let's clarify a key word here: influence. Influence means having the ability to affect how people think or act. The WEF can influence ideas, priorities, and conversations, but it does not have direct power to force action. For learners, this distinction between influence and authority is very important because it appears often in news about international affairs.
A third myth is that all discussions at the WEF are secret or hidden from the public. While some private conversations naturally occur in small meetings, many speeches, panels, and reports are public. Journalists often cover the events in detail, and summaries of key points are widely available. This transparency allows observers, students, and learners to follow discussions and understand global issues.
In easier words, most of what happens at Davos is reported in newspapers, websites, or video channels. Listeners can read, watch, and learn from these reports. For learners, this is a good example of English in real-world contexts. You can notice vocabulary like public, report, speech, panel, and discussion, which are common in media and educational content.
It is also important to clarify the difference between a discussion forum and a governing body. A forum is a space where people come together to exchange ideas, ask questions, and explore solutions. A governing body, in contrast, has formal authority and can create rules, pass laws, or implement policies. Confusing these two leads to misunderstandings about what the WEF actually does.
Imagine a school debate club. The students can talk about ideas, suggest solutions, and discuss topics, but they do not decide the school rules. That is similar to the WEF. It is a forum for discussion, not a place where decisions are legally binding. For English learners, this comparison helps you understand abstract concepts and practice clear explanations in English.
Critical thinking is another very important skill to apply when reading about the WEF. Critical thinking means evaluating information carefully, checking facts, and considering the source before forming an opinion. With social media and online news, it is easy to read headlines or posts that exaggerate or misrepresent events. By using critical thinking, learners can separate facts from rumors or opinions.
Yes, critical thinking is like being a detective. You ask questions such as, who wrote this? Is it reliable? Are there sources or evidence? Can I compare it with other reports? For learners, this approach improves not only English comprehension, but also understanding of international news and global events.
Another point is that the WEF often focuses on complex topics like economics, technology, climate change, and global health. These subjects can seem difficult, and sometimes people fill gaps in their understanding with assumptions or myths. It is better to listen to expert explanations, watch official reports, and read reputable news sources to get accurate information.
Let's break down some vocabulary here. Words like economy, technology, climate, global health, and expert are common in news about the WEF. Knowing these words helps learners understand reports and discussions. Also, noticing phrases like according to experts or research shows indicates that information comes from reliable sources.
To summarize, the WEF is a discussion platform, not a governing body. It influences thinking, but does not make laws or control countries. Not all discussions are secret, and much of the content is publicly available. By understanding these facts, learners can separate myths from reality and follow international news more accurately.
And from a learning perspective, this section teaches valuable skills for English learners. You learn neutral vocabulary, ways to describe organizations and discussions, and strategies for checking information. By combining language learning with critical thinking, You improve both your English and your understanding of global events.
In the next section, we will explore the practical lessons from the WEF and Trump's visit. We will focus on how global forums shape discussions about the economy, technology, and international cooperation, and how you can use these insights to improve your English and global awareness. As we approach the final sections of our discussion, it is important to address a key question. Why should English learners care about the World Economic Forum and events like Donald Trump's visit to Davos? At first glance, a high-level international meeting may seem distant or unrelated to daily life or language learning. However, understanding global events provides multiple benefits for learners, not only in terms of vocabulary, but also in improving listening comprehension, understanding sentence structures, and learning how professional English is used in media and public communication.
Let me simplify that. Global events are reported in English all over the world, in newspapers, television, online news, and social media. When you follow events like Davos, you are practicing real English, the kind that is spoken and written by journalists, experts, and leaders. You learn how sentences are built, how ideas are connected, and how opinions, analysis, and facts are expressed. This is very different from reading a textbook or learning words in isolation.
One of the first benefits for learners is exposure to professional vocabulary. Words like forum, global, economy, policy, strategy, audience, and influence appear frequently in discussions about Davos. By listening to, reading about, or discussing these topics, learners internalize the meaning of words in context. This is far more effective than memorizing isolated vocabulary because context shows how words are actually used.
Exactly, Adam. And it is not just individual words. You also learn useful phrases and expressions commonly used in English reporting. For example, phrases such as experts noted that, analysts explained, the forum highlighted, or the discussion focused on, appear repeatedly in news about global events. Learning these expressions helps you speak and write more naturally and professionally.
Another major benefit is improving listening comprehension. News reports, speeches, and interviews often use formal and structured language. By listening carefully, learners can practice recognizing sentence patterns, linking words, and cause and effect expressions, such as because of, as a result, due to, or therefore. These connectors are extremely important for understanding complex information and for speaking in clear, structured English.
For learners, listening to discussions about global events also helps develop the skill of following ideas step by step. Leaders and experts often explain causes, consequences, and solutions. For example, they may discuss how trade policies affect global markets or how technology impacts employment. Understanding these explanations helps you follow long sentences, identify key points, and connect ideas in English.
In addition to vocabulary and comprehension, following Davos discussions helps learners recognize neutral and professional language. High-level forums aim to present ideas calmly, clearly, and respectfully. This style is valuable for learners because it provides a model for professional communication in English. You learn how to discuss sensitive topics, express opinions without being emotional, and describe complex concepts accurately.
Let's connect this directly to motivation. Learning English through real events makes your study relevant and practical. You are not memorizing words that may never be used. Instead, you are learning language that appears in newspapers, reports, and international media. Over time, you build confidence in understanding English news, forming opinions, and even discussing global topics in conversation or professional settings.
Another advantage is understanding cultural and global context. English is the language of international communication, and global events are often reported in English for audiences worldwide. By following events like Davos, learners gain insight into international priorities, economic trends, and global challenges. This knowledge enhances comprehension and allows learners to participate in discussions more confidently, even when talking about complex subjects.
And it is also motivating. When you see that learning English helps you understand international news, business developments, or technological trends, studying becomes more meaningful. You are not just learning language, you are learning about the world. This combination of language and global knowledge is one of the most effective ways to improve both English and cultural awareness simultaneously.
A practical tip for learners is to actively listen to or read reports about Davos in English and make notes of useful words and phrases. Try to summarize speeches or articles in your own words and notice how linking words connect ideas. This active practice reinforces learning and helps you internalize language structures that appear in professional English contexts.
You can also practice discussing these topics with friends, classmates, or online communities. Use the vocabulary and expressions you have learned, and try to explain global events in simple English. For example, you could say, "At Davos, leaders discussed climate change and technology. Experts explained that new technology may create jobs in some countries, but challenge workers in others." This exercise improves both speaking and critical thinking.
Following global events also improves your reading skills. News websites, press releases, and summaries often include structured articles with headings, subheadings, and clear explanations. By reading these, learners see how professional English is organized, which helps with academic writing, comprehension, and even preparing for English exams. To summarize, English learners should care about Davos because it offers rich opportunities for language learning. You gain exposure to professional vocabulary, structured sentences, linking words, and formal expressions. You develop listening, reading, and speaking skills while connecting language to global events. You also learn critical thinking, media literacy, and cultural understanding, all while practicing English in a real-world context.
And from a motivational perspective, following global forums like Davos shows learners that English is not only a school subject, but a tool for understanding the world. By connecting language learning with current events, learners see immediate relevance, which increases engagement, curiosity, and confidence in using English in real situations. Remember, every article you read, every report you watch, and every discussion you follow is a step toward fluency.
As we move to our final section, we will summarize all the key ideas from this episode, revisit important vocabulary, and reflect on what we have learned about the WEF, Trump's visit, and the value of following global events for English learning.
Yes, dear listeners, stay with us for the final section where we will combine language learning, global awareness, and practical tips. By the end, you will have not only a deeper understanding of Davos and Trump's visit, but also useful English skills you can apply immediately.
As we reach the final section of today's podcast, it is important to take a moment to summarize everything we have discussed in a calm, clear, and learner-friendly way. In this episode, we explored the World Economic Forum, or WEF, and the recent visit of Donald Trump to Davos. We started by explaining what the WEF is, its purpose as a discussion platform, and the types of people who attend, such as politicians, business leaders, economists, and experts from various fields. We emphasized that the WEF is not a governing body, does not make laws, and cannot enforce decisions globally. Instead, it is a forum for exchanging ideas, highlighting trends, and influencing global conversations through dialogue rather than authority.
In simpler terms, the WEF is like a meeting place where people from around the world talk about important issues like the economy, technology, jobs, climate, and trade. It is not a place where rules are made, but a space for sharing ideas. For English learners, this is a useful example of professional English because it shows how formal discussions are conducted and how complex ideas can be communicated clearly.
We also examined Donald Trump's relationship with Davos, focusing on his past positions regarding global institutions and international cooperation. We discussed how his presence at the forum attracted global attention due to his unique communication style, which is often direct, simple, and focused on national economic priorities. By attending Davos, he used the platform as a way to communicate directly with a global audience, including business leaders, journalists, and other political figures. This demonstrates how high-profile individuals use international forums to share perspectives, explain policies, and highlight key achievements or priorities.
For learners, paying attention to his speeches at Davos helps with understanding professional vocabulary such as policy, strategy, audience, and influence. It also teaches how to follow structured arguments and recognize the difference between facts, analysis, and opinion. This is very useful for reading newspapers, watching news reports, or discussing global topics in English.
Another important aspect we covered was the global reactions to Trump's Davos appearance. Media outlets, business leaders, political figures, and analysts all responded in different ways. Some offered support for certain economic points, others expressed caution or criticism, and many provided analytical perspectives without taking sides. We emphasized that describing reactions in neutral language is essential for learners, as it helps you understand multiple viewpoints and communicate about them accurately.
We also highlighted common myths and misunderstandings about the WEF. For example, it is often falsely believed that the WEF controls the world economy or makes laws. We clarified that it is a discussion forum, not a governing body, and stressed the importance of critical thinking and checking reliable sources. For English learners, this demonstrates how to evaluate information carefully, describe what is true or false, and use vocabulary like forum, influence, and analysis correctly.
In addition, we explored why learners should care about Davos from a language learning perspective. Following global events provides exposure to professional vocabulary, structured sentences, linking words, and formal expressions. It helps improve listening and comprehension, reading skills, and the ability to describe complex ideas in English. By connecting language learning with real-world topics, learners can see immediate relevance and practical benefits, which enhances motivation and engagement.
Yes, and it is also about confidence. Understanding global news in English allows learners to participate in discussions, understand reports, and express their ideas clearly. Even if the topics seem complex at first, step-by-step listening and careful practice make them manageable. Remember, every sentence you understand and every idea you can explain in English strengthens your skills and builds your confidence.
We have carefully avoided political bias throughout this episode. Our focus has been purely educational, emphasizing vocabulary, comprehension, and understanding global events in neutral language. It is essential for learners to remember that the aim is to improve English skills while learning about world topics, rather than forming judgments about individuals, governments, or policies.
Exactly. As you continue your English learning journey, it is helpful to follow news stories, international reports, and forums like Davos in a neutral, analytical way. Take notes of new words and expressions, practice summarizing articles in your own words, and try explaining complex ideas to someone else. These habits improve listening, reading, speaking, and critical thinking skills simultaneously.
Another practical tip is to notice sentence structures and connectors used in professional reporting. Words and phrases like, as a result, according to experts, highlighted that, or could influence, appear frequently in news about global events. Recognizing these structures helps learners understand cause and effect relationships, compare ideas, and follow logical sequences in English texts or speeches.
Motivation is very important too. Learning English through real-world topics, like Trump's visit to Davos, shows that language is not only a classroom subject, but also a tool for understanding the world. By connecting vocabulary and expressions to actual events, you are practicing real English that you can use in conversations, work, studies, or professional contexts.
To summarize this summary, today we have learned the WEF is a discussion forum that does not govern. Davos is a space where global leaders exchange ideas. Trump's visit was a communication opportunity that drew worldwide attention. Global reactions were varied and can be analyzed neutrally, and learners can benefit from following such events to improve vocabulary, comprehension, and critical thinking.
Finally, dear listeners, remember that learning English is a continuous journey. Patience, consistent practice, and curiosity about the world will help you progress step by step. Listen carefully, take notes, read articles, and try speaking about these topics. Each small effort builds fluency and confidence.
And let's also remind everyone that the purpose of this podcast is purely educational. We aim to provide clear explanations, improve language skills, and encourage global awareness. Nothing here is intended to support or criticize any individual, organization, or policy. It is designed as a tool for learners to improve their English while understanding real-world events.
Yes, and we hope you feel encouraged and inspired to continue practicing English. Every episode, every new word, and every new idea is a step forward. Keep listening, keep reading, and keep speaking. The world of English learning is wide and full of opportunities, and forums like Davos offer rich examples for improving both your language and your understanding of global affairs.
So, dear listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of the English Globe. We hope you enjoyed learning about the World Economic Forum, Donald Trump's visit to Davos, and the ways these events connect to improving your English. Keep exploring, stay curious, and use what you have learned today in your listening, reading, and speaking practice.
And remember, your English learning journey is unique and valuable. Every moment you spend listening, reading, or thinking in English is progress. Stay calm, stay curious, and continue to practice. Together, step by step, you will achieve greater confidence and understanding in English and in the world around you.
Thank you once again for listening, and we look forward to exploring more global topics with you in future episodes. Keep your notebooks ready, keep your ears open, and continue your journey through English with curiosity and confidence.
Until next time, take care, stay motivated, and remember that learning English opens doors to understanding the world more clearly. You are capable of learning, understanding, and speaking confidently, one step at a time.